There are moments in life when someone enters your world and everything shifts. The air feels different. Your heart responds before your mind can catch up. You don't know why this person has such an effect on you, but something deep within whispers that they're not just anyone. You feel a pull, a magnetic connection that defies explanation. It's intense. It's surreal. It feels like destiny. And yet, for reasons that seem cruel and unfair, you can't be with them. Maybe they're already with someone else. Maybe they live across the ocean. Maybe your lives are heading in two opposite directions, like trains passing each other in the night. Or maybe, deep down, something about the timing just feels off. No matter how hard you try to make it work, it slips through your fingers. It hurts in a way that feels cosmic, as if the universe is playing a trick on you. Why would it send you someone who awakens your soul only to keep them out of reach? Carl Jung believed that these encounters are not random. He introduced the idea of synchronicity, a concept that explains how certain events in life, though seemingly unrelated by cause and effect, are connected by meaning. These events feel charged with emotion. They arrive with a strange sense of alignment, as if everything in the universe conspired to bring them into your life at that exact moment. But synchronicity is not always comfortable. Sometimes it sends you someone you cannot hold on to, and the lesson is found not in the union, but in the ache. What makes these connections so powerful is not just the chemistry. It's the recognition. There is something in their presence that feels familiar, like meeting someone from a forgotten dream. You might find yourself saying things like, "I feel like I've known them forever," or "It's like I've met them before." This eerie familiarity can be intoxicating. It cuts through the small talk and plunges you into emotional depths you usually reserve for people you've known for years. You see glimpses of yourself in them, and they mirror something inside you that you didn't even know was there. But this kind of bond often comes with a paradox. The more you feel, the less you can explain. The closer you want to be, the more impossible it becomes. And in that impossibility, you begin to spiral. You question the universe. You question yourself. Was it all a cruel joke? Or worse, did you imagine it? Jung would argue that your soul recognized something in them. Not just a person, but a symbol. An archetype. Someone whose presence is meant to stir you, challenge you, awaken something dormant within you. The pain of not being able to stay with them is not a punishment. It's a pointer, a signal that this person arrived not to complete your life, but to illuminate a hidden part of it. Often, these encounters happen during periods of transition or emotional vulnerability. Perhaps you're coming out of a breakup, or you're questioning your life's direction. You might feel lost, uncertain, or even numb. And then they appear, like light in the darkness. Suddenly, you feel alive again. You feel seen, understood, even if only for a brief moment. But as quickly as they came, they're gone. And you're left trying to make sense of it all. It's natural to want to hold on, to chase, to believe that love this strong must find a way. But sometimes what we call love is really a mirror. A mirror that shows us what we crave, what we fear, and what we need to heal. Jung believed that our unconscious mind is constantly seeking wholeness. It reaches into the external world and pulls in people who represent the missing pieces within ourselves. That's why the people we feel most drawn to are often the ones who activate the deepest parts of our psyche. But here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Just because someone feels right doesn't mean they are meant to stay. Just because a connection feels magical doesn't mean it's meant to last. The universe doesn't operate on our timelines or desires. It moves according to deeper currents of growth and transformation. And sometimes those currents bring people together for a reason, a season, but not a lifetime. The tragedy is not that it ends. The tragedy is when we miss the gift buried in the pain. When we chase after the person instead of the lesson. When we beg the universe for reunion instead of asking what we're meant to remember. Think back on your own life. How many times has someone entered your world only to leave you changed? Maybe they didn't stay. Maybe you never even dated. Maybe it was a short conversation, a shared glance, or a fleeting summer romance. But their presence shook something loose. You started writing again. You left a toxic job. You learned how to love yourself better. That is the power of a soul encounter. Not in the forever, but in the shift it creates. This doesn't mean that every intense connection is a cosmic lesson. Sometimes people are just passing through. But when the timing feels divine, when the experience feels larger than life, when the loss feels like it echoes through your bones, it's worth paying attention. Because something within you has been awakened, and that awakening has a purpose. Carl Jung once wrote that people meet as part of a psychological process. They are drawn together not by logic but by unconscious needs, desires, and unresolved wounds. When someone arrives and everything inside you feels cracked open, that is the unconscious at work, trying to bring something to light, trying to help you evolve. So if you've ever met someone you couldn't be with, if you still think about them late at night, wondering what could have been, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not broken. You were never meant to be destroyed by that encounter. You were meant to be rebuilt. Not to find your other half, but to reclaim the forgotten pieces of yourself. The ache you feel is not just for them. It's for the part of you that they helped you rediscover. And that is where the story truly begins. It is easy to believe that the people who break our hearts are the villains in our stories. That the pain they leave behind is something they caused intentionally. That if only they had stayed or chosen us, we would be whole. But in truth, many of the people who come into our lives and then leave were never meant to fix us. They were never even meant to stay. They were mirrors. Powerful, startling mirrors sent to reflect back the parts of us that we had buried, forgotten, or denied. Carl Jung understood this dynamic deeply. He taught that the people we are most drawn to are often the ones who awaken our unconscious mind. They bring to the surface the parts of ourselves we are not fully aware of, what he called the shadow. The shadow is not evil or wrong. It is simply the hidden self, the aspects of our personality, emotion, and history that we have not fully accepted. And often, it is through other people, especially the ones who stir our emotions the most, that this shadow is revealed. When someone makes you feel seen in a way no one else ever has, what you are truly experiencing is a deep resonance. They are holding up a mirror to something within you that craves attention. It might be your longing to feel safe. It might be your desire to be chosen. It might be your fear of being abandoned. And when that person eventually walks away or becomes unavailable, those very same wounds are left exposed and raw. That's why the pain of losing someone you were never truly with can feel more intense than the end of a long-term relationship. Because the connection wasn't just emotional. It was archetypal. It was soul-level. It bypassed logic and spoke directly to your inner child, your deepest unmet needs, and your oldest emotional injuries. This is what Jung meant when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The people we cannot be with are often the messengers of that unconscious. They show us our patterns. They challenge our beliefs. They break us open so we can finally look at the pieces inside. You might think you were in love with them. But often, what you really loved was the feeling of being seen, the hope of being healed, the dream of being complete. They became the vessel onto which you projected your most intimate longings. Projection is one of the most powerful psychological mechanisms described by Jung. It is the process by which we place our inner world onto the outer world. We take what we feel, believe, or fear about ourselves, and we imagine it lives in another person. This is not a conscious decision. It happens quietly, automatically, and intensely. You see someone, and they seem familiar. You feel drawn to them, not because of who they truly are, but because they carry the image of something you are missing. And in doing so, they become irresistible. But eventually, reality comes knocking. The person you imagined does not exist. The relationship you dreamed of never materializes. And the heartbreak sets in. Not just the heartbreak of losing them, but the heartbreak of losing the illusion, the fantasy, the projected version of yourself that lived through them. It is at this point that many people get stuck. They obsess. They replay conversations. They search for signs. They wait for that person to return, to realize what they've lost, to finally choose them. But what they're really waiting for is not the person. They're waiting for the wound to close. And the tragedy is that no one else can do that for them. Only by turning inward, by facing the parts of themselves that were mirrored through the other, can they begin to heal. Healing is not forgetting. It is not pretending that the person didn't matter. It is acknowledging the truth of the experience while choosing to learn from it. It is asking, what did they awaken in me? What was I truly craving? What do I now see about myself that I didn't before? These questions are not easy. They require courage, honesty, and patience. But they are the doorway to transformation. Because once you see the mirror for what it was, you stop blaming the reflection. You stop chasing the person and start reclaiming the parts of you that were waiting to be found. There is something profoundly spiritual about this kind of heartbreak. It humbles you. It brings you to your knees. It breaks the shell of ego and invites you into a deeper relationship with your own soul. Jung would say that every loss is an initiation, a symbolic death that clears the path for rebirth. And the person you cannot be with was not your end. They were your beginning. They were the one who cracked open the door to your unconscious and whispered, "Look inside. There is more." Many people resist this truth. They prefer to stay in the longing, the what if, the fantasy. Because facing yourself can be terrifying. It means letting go of the idea that someone else will complete you. It means taking responsibility for your own healing. But there's also tremendous power in this. Because once you stop outsourcing your wholeness, you become free. You no longer need someone to stay to feel worthy. You no longer need a perfect love story to feel complete. You start to realize that the love you were searching for in another was the love you needed to give yourself all along. This doesn't mean you have to stop loving them. Love does not require possession. It does not need a future to be real. Sometimes the most powerful love stories are the ones that never happened. Because they live not in time, but in transformation. They left a mark on your soul, not because of how long they stayed, but because of what they reflected. And if you can honor that reflection, if you can bow to the lesson and carry it with grace, then the loss becomes sacred. It becomes part of your becoming. You might never understand why they came. You might never know why they left. But if you can say, "They showed me a part of myself I had forgotten," then their presence has fulfilled its purpose. You don't have to hold resentment. You don't have to hold on at all. You can simply hold gratitude. Gratitude for the mirror. Gratitude for the lesson. Gratitude for the chance to become more of who you truly are. Carl Jung didn't promise that healing would be easy. He only promised that it would be worth it. And in every person you cannot be with, there is an invitation. An invitation to heal, to grow, to awaken, and ultimately, to remember that the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you build with yourself. When life brings us someone we cannot hold on to, someone who stirs our soul and then vanishes like mist in the morning, our instinctive response is pain. We mourn. We resist. We ask endless questions that rarely lead to answers. Why did they come into my life only to leave? Why did I feel something so real only to be left with nothing? It is human to associate loss with punishment and absence with rejection. But Carl Jung offered a radical alternative. He believed that life is not a cruel puppeteer pulling strings for no reason. Instead, he saw the universe as a mirror of the psyche, working in partnership with the soul to bring us into awareness. Not comfort, not security, but awakening. This awakening often comes disguised as heartbreak, is rarely announced with clarity or logic. It arrives in the form of disruption. Someone appears, seemingly out of nowhere, and everything you thought you understood about yourself and your life begins to shift. The connection might be brief. The relationship might never fully form. But the impact is undeniable. You feel cracked open, exposed, changed. And in that upheaval, the first spark of transformation is lit. Jung believed that the psyche has a deep and persistent drive toward wholeness. This process, which he called individuation, is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming real. It is the journey of integrating all aspects of yourself, both the light and the shadow, the conscious and the unconscious. But the unconscious is not always gentle in how it makes itself known. Often, it uses the external world, particularly relationships, as a canvas upon which it paints our inner dynamics. And few relationships awaken this process more powerfully than the ones that don't last. When the universe sends you someone you cannot be with, it is not condemning you to eternal longing. It is inviting you into a deeper inquiry. It is saying, "Look here. Feel this. Ask why this matters so much. Ask what this person stirred in you that you didn't even know existed. Perhaps you felt seen for the first time. Perhaps you felt wanted in a way that echoed through your childhood wounds. Perhaps you touched a part of your spirit that had been sleeping for years. Whatever it is, that experience was not pointless. It was sacred. Not because of what happened between you and the other person, but because of what it woke up inside you. It's tempting to view healing as a process of erasing pain. But Jung saw it differently. He saw pain as a necessary threshold. A passage. Without pain, there is no urgency to evolve. Without longing, there is no reason to ask the big questions. Without heartbreak, the heart might never learn to open on its own. So when the universe disrupts your life with a person you can't have, it is not punishing you. It is accelerating your growth. It is shaking loose the old structures, the stale identities, the borrowed definitions of love and self-worth. It is asking you to burn so you can rise. Of course, this is hard to accept in the moment. When you're grieving, spiritual insight often feels like cold comfort. You want the person back. You want the story to continue. You want resolution. But the soul is not interested in tidy conclusions. It wants depth. It wants truth. It wants to bring you home to yourself, even if that journey begins in ruin. This is why Jung encouraged people to sit with their suffering rather than numb it, to ask what it is trying to teach. Because suffering, when faced with honesty and curiosity, becomes a doorway. It reveals what we truly value. It shows us where we have abandoned ourselves. It exposes the illusions we have been living under. And eventually, it points us toward authenticity. Toward a life that is not built on fantasy or projection, but on a grounded, integrated self. The universe is not interested in giving you a picture-perfect romance. It is interested in returning you to your essence. And sometimes it uses other people to do that. Sometimes, the one who breaks your heart is the one who unlocks your heart. Not so they can own it, but so you can reclaim it. You do not need to be ashamed of your longing. You do not need to regret the love you felt. What matters is what you do with it. Do you let it close you off, or do you let it open you wider than ever before? Many people spend years chasing the ones who got away, hoping to recapture a moment that felt like magic. But Jung would say the magic was never about the person. It was about what they touched inside of you. They were a symbol, a trigger, a sacred interruption. Their role was not to stay. It was to catalyze. And once that's done, your soul does not need them anymore. It needs you to take the next step alone. This is where courage comes in. The courage to let go. The courage to trust that life is not cruel, but conscious. That your pain is not meaningless, but meaningful. That you are not alone, but being guided. Even in your solitude. Even in your confusion. Especially in your confusion. Because confusion is a sign that your old maps are no longer working. And what a gift that is. To realize that something new is trying to emerge. Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That journey is rarely linear. Is often marked by loss, disillusionment, and broken expectations. But each time something falls apart, something else becomes possible. Each time someone leaves, a deeper self is revealed. And each time your heart breaks, a greater truth is born. The person you couldn't be with might have been the catalyst for that truth. They might have been the spark that set your soul on fire. And now, as the flames die down, what remains is not ashes but clarity. You are still here, still breathing, still capable of love. But now with eyes open, with a heart no longer seeking completion, but expansion, with a self no longer fragmented, but whole. This is what the universe wants for you. Not suffering, not punishment, but awakening. And sometimes that awakening begins with a goodbye. Not because you were wrong, not because they didn't matter, but because something deeper was calling, and you were finally ready to listen. When you look back on the person you couldn't have, the one who slipped through your fingers despite everything your heart wanted, it's easy to see only the void they left behind. You might remember the late-night thoughts, the unanswered questions, the ache of what could have been. But beneath all that sorrow is something else. Something quieter but infinitely more powerful. A lesson, a shift, a transformation that changed not only the way you love but the way you see yourself and the world around you. Because the truth is this. The person you couldn't be with often teaches you more than the one who stayed. Carl Jung believed that the people who come into our lives, especially those who shake our emotional core, do so for a reason rooted in our psyche. They do not just participate in our story. They activate it. They reflect the hidden scripts we've been carrying, the unconscious patterns we've been living out without awareness. And in doing so, they become mirrors, guides, even messengers of the self we're meant to become. Their departure doesn't mean failure. It marks the end of a chapter in your soul's evolution, one that needed to be written with ink made from longing, reflection, and awakening. One of the most profound things you learn from a love that couldn't last is how deeply you can feel. In a world that often encourages emotional suppression and surface-level connection, to be moved so deeply by another person is no small thing. It tells you that your heart is alive, that your soul is awake, that you are capable of vulnerability and intimacy beyond the ordinary. And while that capacity for feeling might have once felt like a burden, over time, it reveals itself as your greatest strength. Because it's through those deep emotional waters that your true self begins to rise. You also learn what you've been carrying without knowing. The fears, the beliefs, the silent vows that have shaped your relationships. Maybe you've spent your life believing you're not enough unless someone chooses you. Maybe you've been running from intimacy while secretly craving it. Maybe you've confused attachment with love, sacrifice with worthiness, longing with destiny. The one you can be holds up a mirror to all of this. Not to shame you, but to free you. Because once you see these patterns, you have a choice. You can keep repeating them, or you can begin the sacred work of healing them. And then there's the lesson of self-trust. When someone leaves, or when a relationship never fully forms, it's natural to question yourself. Did I imagine it? Was I wrong to believe in that connection? But over time, you begin to realize that what you felt was real. Even if it wasn't reciprocated, even if it didn't lead to anything lasting, the depth of your experience is valid because it was yours. And that realization is the foundation of trust in your own inner compass. You stop needing external validation to believe in your truth. You learn to honor your feelings, even when they don't match the outcome. Another gift hidden within the pain is clarity. The person you couldn't be with often represents an ideal, a dream. A version of love that feels complete, safe, exciting, or even redemptive. But as time passes and the fog of emotion begins to lift, you start to see more clearly. Not just who they were, but who you were with them. You begin to notice the ways you abandoned yourself to try to hold on. The ways you overlooked your own needs, compromised your values, or silenced your voice. And in that recognition, you begin to reclaim your boundaries, your desires, your self-respect. Jung would say that this process is essential. That to become whole, you must integrate all aspects of the self. And sometimes that means confronting the parts of you that try to find identity in another person. It means grieving not just the loss of them, but the loss of the illusion that someone else could complete you. It means facing the loneliness you've been avoiding and discovering that it holds something sacred. A chance to meet yourself at the deepest level. A chance to become your own anchor, your own home. And perhaps the most beautiful lesson is this. You can love someone and still let them go. You can honor what they meant without needing them to stay. You can carry the memory of their presence as a blessing, not a burden. This is not detachment in the cold, indifferent sense. Is maturity. Is the kind of love that expands rather than clings. That flows rather than controls. That transforms rather than possesses. And once you taste this kind of love, you begin to offer it to yourself. You start treating your own heart with gentleness and reverence. You stop chasing the external and begin nourishing the internal. It is also in this space of acceptance that gratitude is born. Not the kind of forced gratitude that masks pain, but a deep, genuine appreciation for the role they played in your becoming. You realize that they were not the destination. They were the catalyst. And in a way, they gave you a gift few people ever do. They woke you up. They brought you closer to yourself. They showed you what still needed to heal. And even in their absence, they left behind something that remains. A more aware, more grounded, more compassionate version of you. This journey is not easy. It requires courage to look inward when everything in you wants to look outward. It takes humility to admit that the person wasn't the answer. It demands faith to believe that the pain has purpose. But if you stay with it, if you keep choosing awareness over avoidance, you will emerge transformed. Not bitter, but wiser. Not closed, but more open. Not afraid of love, but more discerning in how you give it. And one day, you will look back and understand. You'll see how everything fit together. How that impossible love led you to a possible self. How the heartbreak became the breakthrough. How the silence birthed a new voice within you. And in that moment you'll smile. Not because you no longer feel the sting of what was lost, but because you now know what was gained. The person you couldn't be with might never return. The chapter may be closed forever, but the story they helped write in your soul is still unfolding. And that story is no longer about them. It's about you. It's about who you're becoming. It's about the life you're creating. A life not built on fantasy or fear, but on truth, wholeness, and self-love. And that is a story worth living. There is a moment in every journey of healing when the pain becomes quiet. It doesn't vanish. It doesn't suddenly make sense. But it settles. Like a tide that no longer crashes against the shore, it simply becomes part of the background rhythm of your soul. In that moment, you realize something powerful. You can let go and still love. You can move forward and still carry meaning. You can be grateful, even for what broke you, because what remains is no longer just the memory of a person. It is the imprint of growth, awakening, and self-discovery. Carl Jung believed that every encounter, no matter how brief or painful, serves the deeper process of individuation. That is the soul's journey to wholeness, and letting go is one of the most sacred acts along the way. Letting go is not about erasing what happened. It is not pretending that the person meant nothing, or that the emotions were a mistake. Quite the opposite. Letting go begins with full acknowledgement. It says, yes, this mattered. Yes, this hurt. Yes, I loved. And still, I choose to release what is no longer meant for me. That choice is not made in denial. It is made in clarity. Because clinging to something that no longer serves your path is like trying to walk forward while holding on to an anchor. At some point, the soul wants to fly, and to do so, it must first put down the weight it was never meant to carry. This weight often comes from the stories we tell ourselves. That if they had stayed, we would have been whole. That if timing had been right, love would have been enough. That we must have done something wrong to lose them. These stories are rooted not in truth, but in fear. Fear that we are not lovable. Fear that we are destined to be alone. Fear that our deepest connections are doomed to disappear. But Jung teaches us that the true enemy is not the loss, but our refusal to see what the loss reveals. That behind every goodbye is a doorway. And behind that doorway is the next version of who we are becoming. When you choose to walk through that doorway, you are not abandoning the love you felt. You are honoring it, because true love does not cling. It does not demand permanence. It does not ask for ownership. It simply exists. It flows. It transforms. And sometimes it ends. But the ending is not the death of love. It is its evolution. It is the moment when love shifts from something shared between two people to something that lives within one. Within you. As memory. As strength. As wisdom. Gratitude, in this context, is not about being thankful for the pain. It is about recognizing what the pain taught you. Perhaps it taught you to listen to your intuition more closely. Perhaps it taught you to hold your boundaries with more compassion. Perhaps it revealed the parts of you that were still seeking validation outside of yourself. Or maybe it simply reminded you that you are capable of loving deeply, of risking, of opening your heart. And that is something to honor, not regret. Jung once said that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But letting go of someone you can't be with is a profound step toward that acceptance. Because in releasing them, you are choosing yourself. You are choosing your path, your healing, your wholeness. You are saying, I no longer need someone else to reflect my worth. I see it now. I feel it. I live it. This doesn't mean the longing disappears overnight. Sometimes it lingers. It returns in quiet moments, in dreams, in the shape of someone's eyes on the street. But now it carries less weight. It feels less urgent. Because you've stopped waiting for them to come back and started returning to yourself. You stopped asking why and started asking what now. And that shift changes everything. Letting go also opens the door to new possibilities. Not just in love, but in life. Because when your energy is no longer tethered to the past, it becomes available for the present. You begin to notice things you had forgotten. The way the sun touches your skin in the morning. The sound of your own laughter. The joy of being alone without feeling lonely. These are not small things. They are signs that your soul is reawakening. That your center is no longer outside of you, but within. And when love does return, if it does, it will find you different. It will find you whole. Not waiting for someone to complete you, but ready to share your completeness. Not afraid of loss, but rooted in presence. Not addicted to intensity, but attuned to depth. This is the kind of love that does not demand suffering. It invites peace. It grows in stillness. It honors freedom. And it can only be experienced by someone who has walked through the fire of letting go and come out more alive. So if you find yourself standing at the edge of goodbye, know this. You are not being abandoned. You are being invited. Invited to return to the truth of who you are. Invited to shed the illusions of need and scarcity. Invited to trust that what is meant for you will never require you to shrink, to chase, or to betray yourself. And most of all, invited to carry forward not the weight of loss, but the light of learning. You may never fully understand why the universe sent you someone you couldn't be with. But if you walk away with a clearer sense of self, a more open heart, and a deeper trust in life, then maybe that was the reason all along. Maybe they weren't your destination, but your detour. The necessary twist in the road that brought you back to yourself. Carl Jung believed that the soul knows what it needs long before the mind can catch up. And sometimes the soul needs to be broken open, not to be punished, but to be made whole. So let the tears come. Let the memories rise. Let the ache be felt. But then, let the gratitude grow louder. Gratitude for the encounter. Gratitude for the mirror. Gratitude for the journey that only began once they left. You are not lost. You are becoming. And the person you couldn't be with may have been the spark, but you are the fire. Burn brightly. Keep walking. You are not walking away from love. You are walking deeper into it. If this message resonated with you, it's because the journey of healing isn't about erasing the past, it's about reclaiming yourself through it. The people you can't be with are not detours. They are mirrors, messengers, and milestones on your path to becoming whole. So breathe, reflect, and remember, you weren't meant to stay broken. You were meant to awaken. If you found depth and clarity in today's video, consider joining us on this journey inward. Subscribe to Library Mindset for more soul-expanding content inspired by Carl Jung and beyond. Because the most powerful answers don't come from chasing, they come from understanding. And your next breakthrough could be just one insight away.